Nakanishi Chieko in your screen, number one, and the eldest member of this Japanese squad at 26.5 years old. Just introducing the referee. A lot of work on their hands. From Taipei, Ho Chang Chen. And assistant the net judge is Charanpong Sangchak from Thailand. Looking at the match statistics, a couple of key, as I pointed out. One is age, the other is height. The Cuban side vastly experienced, player 30.5 years old. That's Latham Black. He was born in 1902. Critical differences though in height, which translates into advantages in terms of spiking and blocking. Looking at the Cuban side, the average in meters of spike, 3.8 meters, and the greatest spike height, 3.37 meters. Looking at the Japanese meter, the average height spiking capability, just over 3 meters, 3 meters, and the greatest 3 meters 15. Just looking at the heights recorded for the various Japanese players, of course playing in the red and white tops. Number 11 is Kajimi Kob, 69 kilos in weight. He plays for the Hitachi side. He first started playing in 1989 in the Asian Junior Championship. So Costa Blanco Marlines leads out the side for Cuba, wearing number 2. And look at that, very powerful lineup. 2 players over 1 meter 90. There's Bell McKenzie just coming onto the picture. The 50th experienced player, the World Cup in 1989 and the basketball in 92. Luis, number 3, watch out for her. She can spike up to 11 feet in the air. She was named one of the 6 most exciting athletes in the Barcelona Olympics. So real pedigree and power on the Cuban side, but the Japanese will be determined to play well in front of this very vociferous and supportive Tokyo home crowd. Both sides have got good victories under their belts. Both sides beating Germany 3 sets to love. Cuba being beaten by Russia 1-3. And in Japan's game, well, they beat Russia 3-1. So if that's anything to go by, certainly match results indicating the Japanese could well be stronger on the day. Nakanishi Chieko, the oldest player to serve first for Japan in this first set. Great spike. That's Cavallal. Really rose strong and high in the air. Costa Blanca serving. Great block. Japan's still in it though. Here comes Cavallal. And that's the killer spike. So, first point to Cuba. Oh, good strong play on the flank there. That's number 5, Miki Yamachi. Serving. And a great service. Listen to the crowd kick in, they love this. Cuba just losing concentration a little bit. Poor field vision. Cuba left themselves very weak in the midfield. 3 players rushed the net. And of course that sucks players out of the midfield, so if the block is there, you're very vulnerable. That's much better. Once again, Cavallal. And I think she could well be one of the key players that Cuba will be looking to. Remember, they're 1-1 so far in this championship. Makoko Aobayaki of the net. And it's long. Well, Hernandez Luis will be upset with that. She had great court position and a beautiful set to run onto. Was pushing it too deep. That's much better. Real fine. Well, I was sitting, Yamamoto's shot looked... Come on to serve now. And it's good. Both sides just playing themselves into the match. Nobody yet showing any overwhelming dominance. Good point for Japan. Cuba put up a two-person block, but just couldn't dig the ball back into play. Obayashi with a left-handed serve. Torres Carrera to serve now. Great cracking thump there. Japan clearly showing they're not going to be overawed by the tremendous pedigree of these Cuban women. She really rocked there that time. Good block. Well, I said block, but in fact, the power on it was such in the direction of the back in the block. They've got her against serving. Keep it down. It's a very strong one off the left-hand side of the court. From Belkenji. Look at this point again. Cavalier has Japan service 3-all. Great pinpointing it. Disappointing. Square. Cuba 4, Japan 4. 7 points to 5. Thanks to the window point. Oh, that was real play. Japan completely defeated by the position of the shot. Look at it there. And a telling shot. Well, a great point. Very happy with that one. So a great deal of Cuban pressure. And although you have to give it to Cuba at the moment in terms of their attacking firepower, very resolute from the Japanese. Service reception is such a critical part of national volleyball, men's and women's competition, and this very much a dance group. point for Cuba. As I said, service reception crucial because there were 3 key points in volleyball: the reception, the set, and the spike. And if you don't get the first one right, you can't get the set and the spike in. Nice play. Very slick maneuver that. That's Motoko Obayashi. And she'll take up service. Look at that. Very fast arm action. Well, again, a very poor service reception. Instead of offering up the set, the reception drifted over the net. No problem for Japan. So they're up 8-7. Obayashi still serving. And that huge scream from Costa. She just roared as she came into the net. Number 2 up and a shot down the line. Cuba, I think, will rely on Cavallal a great deal as this match progresses. She's got a very wise head on her shoulder. Good recovery from Japan with a very indifferent service reception. And Cavallal once again there to win the point with a critical change of pace. Really took the speed off it and just nudged it over the net. Lovely point for Cuba. And it's long. Just looking at this again, you'll see it comes off Cuban hands. So, Nakanishi to serve. Good block, but again you saw the flank of Cuban women rushing up to the net. That meant that if the block was there, the reception was going to be very difficult. Big wide spaces open on the Cuban side of the net. And it's long. Well, a great series of points for Japan. They really have pulled their game together. And a timeout called. Well, you have to say that Japan is making the running. They're keeping the ball in play and allowing Cuba to make the mistakes. And that's the telling situation in the match so far. Looking at Eugenio George, the Cuban head coach, supported by Antonio Perdomo. So Cuba finding themselves in a position where they could play themselves out of contention in this first set. Japan really have been tremendous in defense. Keep the ball alive. A huge point for Japan. If Prieto lies on the floor, he was the one that missed the set, but a great point. Strong play from Japan. They have to keep this pressure up because Cuba seem to be wilting. And again, real confusion close to the net on the Cuban side. So Japan up by 3 points. Here comes the block, critical block. And butterfingers on the part of the Cuban players. Well, a very telling shot there from Belle McKenzie. But again, right through that point, the fact that it was so long, you saw Japan really working overtime to keep that ball in play. So, first points for Cuba in 4.5 minutes. 10-12. Costa Blanca to serve. Well, Japan won't be able to win this one. Great showing, team tactics, but more than 3 shots on the Japanese side. So 11-12, Cuba down. Playoff, it's the preliminary competition still. The final match of the Tokyo leg. And it's Cuba in the foreground of your picture up against Japan and having a real torrid time against the home team. Well, another Japanese strike. That's much better. That's the kind of play we expect from Cuba, and once again Cavallal at the center of it. Style serving. He's just come on as a substitute. Good block. But the point, the side out goes to Japan. That's a lovely shot. And Hernandez-Luis punches the air with delight. Feels great to get a shot in like that. Look at the height she gets. And it's only that height that allows her to get the very acute angle. So a couple of good points on the Cavallal serve. Quickly, Japan take the initiative back. Mika Yamaguchi face the Dai club, and a timeout called. Big substitution. Taiki comes on. She'll take the serve instead of Yamaguchi. Beautiful play. Wow, that's the sign of a real champion player, that. Hernandez-Luis just taking the pace off the spike, completely throwing the Japanese blocking pair. Lovely artistry. So, still 12 all. Cuba serve. Obayashi very quick to get that shot across. And the block just impacting on the shoulder of the Cuban player and into the net. So, Japanese serve. And it's wide. Well, Hernandez-Luis doesn't miss many opportunities like that. But in the closing stages of this first set, Japan have just edged out 1 point ahead. Well, it's served long. Certainly a good option to go, because I noticed in receiving serve, Cuba do crowd the midfield. And it's long. So Kyoko Fukuda cost Japan their service advantage. Coming on now, Mika Yamaguchi, who just left the field briefly. So her substitute gets back onto the bench. And that one long as well. Well left. So Nakanishi leaves. And Miho Murata comes on. Expect to see Nakanishi coming back on in a couple of minutes. He's very experienced. Central figure on this Japanese side. And a great block. So Japan have set points. And this really would be an upset. You saw the spike, the block, and then hitting the Cuban player's head. And Eugenia George just shrugging his shoulders. Number 15, Cavallal, she looks concerned. She certainly would have expected to be one set down against Japan. But of course, this is a best-of-5 set, so it's not as if the first set is necessarily indicative of the final result. Certainly the Cuban players and coach will be hoping that's the case. Obayashi to serve now. Set point, remember, 14-13. And it's good. So a momentary respite for Cuba, thanks to the spike of Bell McKenzie. Nakanishi coming back onto the court. And Leskay, Sonia Leskay comes on. The first we've seen of her. So Torres Herrera hoping to build up something of a recovery for Cuba. Down 13-14. And it's wide. Now, Bell McKenzie should have made much more of that. I don't think she got quite high enough to be able to justify a shot at that angle. So, set point, 14-13. Well, Cuba seems to be relying increasingly on Caballero. Whenever they're in trouble, up she pops. So, Martinez Costa Blanco. And Japan immediately wrests control back. Kuda serving. Set point again. And that's it. That's the first set to Japan. Well, the crowd erupts in joy and appreciation of the sterling work that this home team has put in. 15-13 the score in the first set. 25 minutes of very exciting play. And the lesson of the first set for Cuba, don't make mistakes. Japan against Cuba, now the match statistics in the first set. And again, that's very interesting. Cuba with 2 more attacking opportunities than Japan. But the critical thing was they couldn't convert the opportunities, and furthermore they made a great number of unforced errors. Japan being able to stand up to the superior attacking power of Cuba and just waiting for Cuba to make mistakes, which in the end added up to a 1-set victory to Japan. So Cuba to serve off first, down 1-set to love against the home team. Lovely left-handed strike there from Bell McKenzie. He's a particularly important component of this Cuban side. Very strong digger. Normally tops the match stats in receptions for the Cuban side. And then, of course, there's this lady, Caballero. Normally quite comfortably the top scorer in any Cuban outing. Caballero again coming round onto the right-hand side of the court. There she is, number 15. And that's something I also failed to mention. She normally tops the statistics in blocking for the Cuban team as well. So Cuba rushing to an early 4-point lead in the second set. And obviously they've really got their heads around the problem in the break between first and second set. Junior George has taken his team through a lot these past couple of years. Whereas Japan, really, if you had to look at their international records, the last great glory days for Japanese women's volleyball were in the mid-70s. In 76 they won the Olympic gold, and in 77 they won the World Championship. Or should I say the World Cup, when it was staged in Osaka. So Japan receiving, down love 4. And that'll feel good. Hajime Asako running onto a very nicely executed spike. And that's good. So Cavalier once again gets in a very strong block. Cuba up 5 love. Well, a difficult point for Japan to have to defend there. Two indifferent shots. One, the set, which actually drifted over the net, and the other, the reception, the dig. And Cuba really having no trouble. But just looking at the service call, obviously ruled that Cavalier touched the net. So side out Japan. And let's see who that goes to. Well, it's a point to Japan. Mackenzie has been one of the stronger and more obvious members of this Cuban team. He plays very well out left. He's a left-handed player. Well, Japan's very lucky to get away with that point. The service reception was weak, and the ball drifting over the net. It should have been an easy put away for Cuba, but the players were out of position. That's great. Great play. Gabriel again involved. Just massaging the ball over the arms of the blockers at a gentle pace. Watch this point again. Textbook play for any young volleyballers watching. How to put away a perfectly offered set. And that point again. Two classic plays. The blocking on both occasions was not quite as good as it possibly could have been. Corriero to serve for Cuba. Well, Japan's struggling in that point, and they're struggling in the set as well. In the second set of the Cuba-Japan match, it is the final game in this preliminary leg here in Tokyo. So Japan take the point. They win the serving opportunity. The block just not making it quite over the net. So good couple of plays. Yamauchi once again involved. That's more characteristic of Cuba. Really great firepower they can count on. Look at that height. Huge, cracking shot. Hernandez Luis to serve them. Cuba up 6-2. And a Japanese point. It looked dangerously as if one of the blockers might have got their hands on that, but in fact, it sailed wide on its own account. So Nakanishi to serve. And you have to say, just looking at that point, that certainly the Cubans have the greater armory. They can rely on much greater strength of shot. But the Japanese are very, very tenacious competitors. That shot there from Tajimi, for instance. No great power on it, but it was a winner nonetheless. Great reception. Oh, what a wonderful point. What a wonderful point that was. Japan up 3-6 now, but this really could have been anybody's. A bit of an impasse with the block there, and just falling down onto Cuba's side. Across the blanket to serve. That's a good block. Del McKenzie ensuring the direction was there. And Cuba seemed to have been pulled up a little bit short. They were threatening to run away with the second set. But it's given to Japan. Let's look at the replay again. You see the spike just coming off Cuban hands. So 3-7 down. And a big booming shot on the right flank there from Caballero once again. And the block going into the net. This match, of course, by no means a dead rubber, as you'd say in tennis. In fact, it will help decide the outcome of this preliminary competition. The way the tournament is structured, there are two legs. One in Tokyo, one in Seoul. Oh, good strong point. And the winner from each preliminary competition will play off against the winner from the other to determine the first and second place sides. First team will pick up a check for $50,000 US. The second for $30,000 US. And at the moment, just looking at the preliminary results from this Tokyo leg, Japan, of course, come into this match with a 2-0 record. Cuba a 1-1. Russia has already finished all of its games, and it's on 2-1. But of course, if in terms of matches won and lost, there's a draw, then it's decided on set won and lost, and the ratio. So both these teams could qualify, but only if Cuba wins and Japan loses. If Cuba loses, then it'll be Japan and Russia who go through. So a great deal to play for in this match, very nicely balanced. Japan up, of course, one set, but down 3-8 with service. And a great spike from Cuba, so they will serve 8-3 up when we come back. Mura serve off. As Japan attempt to build on a very impressive first set performance. As you can see, they're trailing by 5 points in this second set. Good point. Well, a case of a Cuban lack of concentration there. Japan slowly edging back into this second set. Cuba, of course, the current Olympic champion. Tremendous performance in Barcelona. And rather like the Cuban national boxing team, for many years there has been unquestioned Cuban dominance in women's volleyball. But Japan certainly making a fist of this challenge. So substitute Tsuya Nomura to serve. That's a great point. And as Luis always looks threatening when she comes charging up on the right-hand side here. Look at the height that she got. She was a full head above the Japanese players. But again, very much the measure of the Japanese players that although they've not been able to rely on straight strength, they have played their shots well. And you'd have to say, looking at a service reception like that, they've also been able to count on a number of unforced errors from the Cuban side. Nakanishi serving again. Well, again, another power play from the Cuban, Bell McKenzie. That's one of the considerable disadvantages of blocking high-powered shots, is that you have next to no control over where the ball lands. And it's good. Well, number 5, Yamauchi, really took a risk directing the shot where she did. She deliberately played it long to baffle the blockers. Just made it inside the baseline. So across the blanket to serve. 10-6 up. Well, I think just looking at that performance, Cuba increasingly managing to knit their defense together. It was a little bit all over the place in the first set. Having said that, they left a very big hole down the sideline. Look at this point in replay. No question that was in. So a good Japanese point. But as I said, I think Cubans just mending their mistakes defensively. Continue to serve. Well, a first point for substitute Mika Saiki as a timeout is called. An interesting little point in this second set, and the Cuban coach, Eugenio George, will be trying to convince his team to keep up the pressure. Don't let Japan get back into this one. But the first set definitely not going to expectation. 15-13 to Japan. Cuba up 11-8 in the second. And with the service opportunity now, Cuba will be hoping to close this set down. Very nice point. Well, great play in the air, magical volleyball. But Cuba really had to work hard for that point. And a substitution. Nakamura comes back on. Saiki, the substitute, comes off. Cuba really did have to struggle, though. Great defensive and counter-attacking skill shown by Japan throughout that last rally. Well, Well, a good point for Cuba. It was Belle McKenzie who's actually serving at the moment. They had to scurry across the baseline with the set. Big, long, looping set. Enabling Cuba to get back into the point and win it. Well, Cavallal doesn't miss many like that. And Japan will be very grateful for the opportunity because they're languishing 5 points behind the Cubans. And Marchi to serve. Well, a real gift for Cuba. They just need 2 points and they're back level. So Cavallal for serve. And a disappointing service return. Well, Kazunori Yoneda, the Japanese coach, will be disappointed. Cavallal gives up serve though. So an opportunity to capitalize on set point now. It's Riedo to serve. Well, it's one set point save. Yamamatsu's shot blocked there. That's spinning off past the sideline. Well, that was a rather different set. And twisted over the net, but most critically it was out. So 9-14. And long. Well, once again, Japan in dire straits in the second set. Cuba have missed 2 set-point opportunities. Hernandez Luis to serve, and a very reckless choice of options. Nakanishi. And that's 1 point in the bag. So, could this be a comeback? The crowd are loving it. A huge jump from Mika Yamachi. 10-14 down still. Well, again, 2 really strong examples of Japanese play. That's how they've took the first set. And they've won 2 points in the second set. Great defensive work. Really solid grasp. And Cuba, as they come to the sidelines, look just a little bit deflated. The big eyes of Hernando Luis, listening to the instructions of Eugenio George, who's criticized them on a couple of occasions during this tournament for not concentrating. Cuba had a really bad spell in the first set against Russia. They were up 13-12. And they lost the set 16-14. And George blamed concentration for that defeat. Well, Nakanishi, something of a sporting superstar in Japan, doesn't make mistakes like that very often. Once again, set point though, 14-11. Well, it's Cavallal who wins it for Cuba. They did very well to get back into that rally, and a couple of points it looked very desperate. But that's enough to take the second set, 15 points to 11. Cuba dropped the first 13-15, 23 minutes in all for the second set, and a much more decisive performance. And Japan will be worried. We'll have the third set when we come back. In the Women's World Volleyball Grand Prix for 1993, just waiting for Chieko Nakanishi to serve off for Japan, the eldest player in the Japanese side. And the match very nicely poised. One set all. Japan took the first, 15-13. Cuba the second, 15-11. And it's Cuba gets that winning feeling early on in the third set. Cavallal once again, she scored the winning point in the second set. She takes the first point of the third. Just summing up that second set, I didn't get any sensation that Japan altered their game or that in any way they slipped, despite the fact that they did lose that second set. I thought it was very much a case of Cuba tightening up their own play. Shots like that. In the first set, they were few and far between for the Cuban women's team. Belle McKenzie was somebody who played consistently well through sets 1 and 2 alongside Cavallal and also Hernandez Luis. Hajime Asako has been very strong for Japan. She was a member of the 1991 World Cup team and also their Olympic team. But Cavallal really has been the star of Cuba's performance. Consistently good and strong and a great disciplinarian. She's really pulled her team together when at the beginning of the second set things did look very grim. And it's on her service that Cuba takes the first point of the third set. Well, her serve drifting long the second serve. Yamashita to serve now for Japan. Good point. And Hernandez Luis here, just look at the position she gets. Again, a hugely strong player. Really dramatic player. Jumping up very high and a strong downward thrust. And again. Cuba really opening up these last couple of points. Well, a difficult shot for Kuda. She approached the spike at sort of the midfield level, and it was going to be a difficult one to get inside the court line. So let's just take a look at some match stats from the second set, and you can see Cuba really beefing up their attack. During the break, Cuba put another couple of points past Japan. They're now 5-love up in this third set. Well, a little bit of miscommunication there as to what to do on the Cuban side. It gives Japan a vital chance to get back into this game. Well, they'll be thankful for that. A very indifferent service return from the Cubans. So, first points in this third set for Japan. And the service is looking a critical area that Japan is going to have to work on, because it's quite obvious that the Cuban women have really got into their stride with the spiking. Japan's blocking capabilities have been pushed to the side a little bit. And Japan has to work this serve well. They have to force the mistakes on the service reception from Cuba. Good point. Cavallal once again, towering figure, cutting off the point. Very well moved. And you saw the way she slapped her hands down, deliberately controlling the passage of the ball. So Fukuda takes up service. Good block. Nakamura showing just how it should be done. Very close to the net. And absolutely no doubt that ball was going down. If you remember the second set, the scoring margins and the way the early points went, very similar to this third set. Cuba were also up 5-love at one stage. Good point. Beautiful touch. Again, Mika Yamachi, one of the stars of the Japanese side, just sensing that maybe the power shot was a little bit too risky. Definitely just lobbing it over that two-person blocking team. Now, Cavallal is a real danger whenever she gets the chance to spike. She serves 5-2 up. Well, it was a good point for Japan to win. I have to say I felt that Cavallal's serve was going to drift wide, but Japan played it anyway. Well, Cuba, the critical mistake they made there was to play the Japanese spike. Seemed to be passing well long, but they took it back into play, paid the penalty for it. And that's long as well. Number 10, Torres Herrera. So Japan closed the gap now, just 2 points between them. Remember, Cuba was up 5-love at one stage. That'll feel good. Luis Hernandez there, who plays for the Camogay side. Again, look at that height he gets. Magnificent performance. Well, Japan very lucky to get the side out. Costa shrugs her shoulders. You know, she should have done better. Well, an interesting tactical ploy by Japan. They seem to be playing their spikes from pretty quite deep. Not as close to the net as maybe you think they might do. That was better positioning. Much closer to the net when the spike was hit. But in the previous point, I think the problem was that the Japanese set really actually drifted quite long on the court. And that makes it very difficult if you're trying to hit it downwards at the same time as avoiding the net. So Torres Herrera comes up with a power shot. He was serving 5-3. This very exciting encounter between Cuba, up 7-4 against Japan, the home side. It's 1 set all, and we're in the third set. And Cuba really managing to put together a couple of good combinations. It has to be said, I think I mentioned it before, that they do on paper possess superior attacking powers. But the Japanese hope lies in their very resolute defensive teamwork. Good example of it just there. Lovely point. Well, that's exactly what I meant. It's not necessarily the volume that you play at, the dexterity, it's the quality of it. Once again, Cuba switching to the far left-hand side of the court. Japan crowded over there on the right-hand side, expecting a shot from that angle. So good point for Cuba there. Just chance for a little timeout. Kazunori Yoneda, the Japanese coach. Possibly just suggesting that the Japanese women's team should just calm their play. Looking at Motoko Obayashi, who's had a fairly quiet role in this Grand Prix playoff. As you can see, a very tall lady and a key figure up at the net. Costa Blanca serving. Yoko Fukuda has looked very strong for Japan throughout this match. Just coming off, in fact. Ichiro Namorua, first time we saw her was in the second set, playing as a substitute. Just coming on quickly. And obviously the key difference between these teams, Cuba is really relying on brute strength in many ways. The Japanese far more likely to play tactically to a victory. For instance, just like that, forcing an error from the Cubans. Well, that was a very strong opening serve. Fujimi has much to be credited for there. Forced a very indifferent service reception. And that one as well, interesting. Hernandez Luis, very upset with herself. The service reception wasn't strong, and so the set was misdirected, making the shot, the fight, quite awkward. Now, having won 2 points, Cuba set themselves a side out. Rivera Cavallal to serve. Well, a great point for Japan. That was all credit to Obayashi. So Cavallal just coming off for a couple of minutes. This is Norca Lassenblatt, the oldest member of the Cuban side. First time we've seen her in this match. Prieto making no mistakes second time round with his fight. Good point for Cuba. So they're into double figures. And this match playing out a little bit reminiscent of the second set. In spite of that serve, you have to say Cuba going from strength to strength. So Namura comes off, and Kyoko Fukuda comes back onto the court. And down 6-10. Well, Obayashi just trying to do a little bit too much there. He's trying to finger it over the net. In fact, didn't get the height on it. Good block. Great point for Japan. Kyoko Fukuda was the person with the winning smash. The spike came off Cuban hands. But again, that was very characteristic of the Japanese play. Did everything possible to stay in contention. And again, the Japanese making things very hard for Cuba. Very strong opening serve. And that was the killing spike. This serve has cost Cuba dear. So Cavallel comes back onto the court. So a wasted opportunity from Torres Herrera. Yoko Nakanishi now. Mr. Songsak from Thailand has ruled that one of the Cuban players touched the net. I didn't quite catch who it was. Well, as timeout is called, Japan showing every intention of taking this match down to the wire. We'll be back with more in a couple of minutes. Between Cuba and Japan. Japan serving down 8-11. And it's one set all. Blanca serving. Well, Cavallel once again coming to the front. She's a remarkable player. She's been the absolute bedrock of Cuba's performance so far. A couple of the Cuban players, speaking of Costa Blanca and Torres Herrera, have been a little bit erratic, to say the least. But Cavallel has been spot on more times than not. And Belle McKenzie, another lady who's played an extremely good Grand Prix match here today. Well, Japan will find it very difficult to thread together some sort of a comeback strategy. They keep dropping serve like that. Cavallel meantime for Cuba. Good point. Hernandez Luis there rising up into the skies. Look at that. Cavallel again. Well, just chopping at that one. The ball just seeming to hang in the air desperately. So Yamachi comes off, and Saiki Mika comes on. I think we'll see Yamachi come back into play. Not too distant future. Meantime, Saiki to serve. And a very good serve it was from Taiki. Cavallal can't believe that the point ended as chaotically as that. It's a very difficult serve, a lot of topspin on it. Suddenly dropped. Well, again, another good serve, and the measure of it was that the service reception was difficult for the setter to put in place, and it was that set that drifted over the net. So once again, a couple of easy points for Japan with service. And this is the exact same position that Cuba faced, finding it difficult to hold on to an early points lead. Just fading just that little bit. Critical question is, can they hold on? So Japan still with service. And over the net. Well, a bad mistake from Hernando Luis. That's much better. I have to say, Mika Saiki is, although she plays her role as essentially a substitute, she put in three very distinguished serves there, causing Cuba a great deal of trouble. So we have set points. Yamachi quickly comes back on. Seichi's back on the bench. But Yamuchi could have chosen a better time to come back. Down 11-14, reset points. And that's the set. Well, congratulations to Cuba. They take it 15-11. The same margin as the second set. Don't forget, of course, the first set was Japan, 15-13. So will the fourth set be decisive, or can Japan fight back? Find out after the break. Japan is looking at some of the match stats for that third set. And again, the critical difference, Cuba, superior attacking powers, 19 opportunities to score against Japan's 10, and 12 blocks up against Japan's 7. So that really does tell the tale of the third set. The Japanese always knew that they would be coming in against the Olympic champions. And the Cubans there, look at them, definitely a stronger physical presence on the court. The real key Japanese hope, though, was that the solid defensive work and taking every single one of the counter-attacking opportunities, they could unsettle the Cubans. They do have somewhat frail concentration patterns. Well, that's certainly an encouraging opening rally in this fourth set as far as the Japanese are concerned. Yuka Fukuda now to serve. And an opening point for Japan. Well, they haven't won an opening point of the set since set one, which of course they took. Both times in sets 2 and 3, they very quickly fell to 5-love deficits. Costa Blanca to serve now for Cuba. Well, Cavallal, as ever, proving the torment of the Japanese. There were two women on her to block. Look at it there. And she took the alternative road, just dropped it over the net. The service is long, so both sides get 1 point on the board and then hand over service. again, it's going to be points like that that are going to be critical to Cuba if they can sustain the hold they have on this match. They really must make their attacking skills pay for them. Nice work from Obayashi there. Rising high in the air, off to the left-hand side of the picture. And she really has got a pumping strong left arm on her as well. That's one of the very dramatic characteristics of the Cuban play, rather like the Brazilian. Extraordinary ability to reach sky high. One of the highest averages in terms of the height capability on both the spike and the two-handed block. And there again you see the point. A real menace in the air, Hernandez Luis. Well, a very creatively styled rally, that one. Two occasions where Obayashi at the net for Japan just tried to flick the ball over. Cuban player was there, did likewise, and found the Japanese midfield completely open. There was a great deal of emphasis, obviously, on power plays, putting in the big spikes, but those fluid little graceful shots are often more likely to win points than the big shots. Well, a very good series of plays these last 3 or 4 minutes from Hernandez Luis. She really has been consistent thorn in the side for Japan. So a poor Cuban block on a Fukuda spike, and Japan will be serving 2-4 down when we come back. Down 2-4 in the fourth. And they've just pulled 1 point closer to the Olympic champions. Well, Luis Hernandez can always be relied on to convert points from those sort of situations. She loves to prowl on the left-hand side of the court, and she takes over service now. Well, again, another good, strong Cuban point. Bell McKenzie there, that time converting for Cuba. What a cracking rally that was. Fantastic stuff. And Japan really showing the guts and courage. It was on the strength of that they took the first set. Really wonderful play there, refusing to be intimidated by the striking power of Korea. Look at that, that's real commitment. Just managing to get the ball over the net. In the end, just a little bit too much to ask for them. So once again, Hernandez Luis serving. And Cuba looking to build upon this early fourth set lead. And it's wide. Well, Japan already back in the hunt in this fourth set. point. Well, this 9,000 crowd here in the Tokyo National Stadium really enjoying that one. Well, a huge spike there from Torres, the number 10. The second tallest member of this Cuban national team. She plays volleyball in Havana for Ciudad Havana, alongside Caballal. And a Japanese point. So, in spite of the 2-1 advantage that Cuba has, Japan really keen to get back into contention. And a good strong block. Well, a wonderful sight there. Asako Tajimi, one of the stronger Japanese players. On correction, in fact, it was Miki Yamochi who actually got a hand on the ball. And again, just looking at that sequence of play, Costa Blanca setting up there with a huge spike, taking over service now. You get a very strong sense that Cuba can win this one. They certainly have in their team players with a stronger point-scoring ability. Luis Fernandez putting in the spike, but just going off Japanese hands. So for Japan, the real struggle is to keep out these very strong Cubans, to unsettle them just like they did in the first set, and make them commit unforced errors. But again, just proving my point there, Belle McKenzie steps up to the net with a huge spike. So Yoshihara comes on. This is the first we've seen of her. And very quickly into the action. Serving now. And a good point, Caballal there. 1.9 meters tall. Born just 7 days before Christmas, 1969. Well, the home crowd here was really willing Yoshihara to get that ball back into play. Difficult one. And a timeout called. Japan definitely on the defensive here, is including stages of this fourth set. Stadium, just a confirmation of the scoreline there. Cuba, the Olympic champions, up 9 points to 6 and holding a 2-1 advantage over the home team, Japan. Japan, of course, earlier on this week recording strong victories over both Russia, 3-1, and also Germany, 3-0. Now very strong play from Caballal, who's worked very hard on her attacking game since the Olympics. She's best known as a blocker, having been named best blocker at both the World Cup in '89 and the Barcelona Olympics. But she's turned into an extremely adept point scorer as well. So Nomura just comes on as a substitute for a couple of minutes. She takes over serve. Well, Japan take the point. Hernandez Luis looks very upset. I'd like to see this replay again from the angle. Well, it doesn't really show us, but the spike drifting wide anyway. And that one wide as well. So Japan take 2 points. more characteristic of kind of firepower we expect from the Cuban front line. Cavallel once again in the action, and if Cuba do take this, Japanese really have to look at Cavallel as the woman that undid their chances in this match. MOT coming back on again. Nomura takes her place again on the subs bench. There she is, huge figure in Cuban volleyball, both literally and spiritually. And this a very grim scoreline for Japan. 4 points down on the Cavallel serve. But not to be outdone. Yamuchi organizing a comeback. Kazumi Nakamura to serve. Now Cuba wrestle the service advantage back. Really wanting to know how they can beat these Japanese down. They really have been very tenacious throughout this match. And that a classic case in point. Absolutely refusing to give in there. Kyoko Fukuda plays volleyball for the Hitachi team, member of the Olympic squad. Miho Murata coming on as a substitute. Oh, and a great serve there from Motoko Obayashi. Really found the Achilles heel in that Cuban defensive layout. Just floated the ball in there. A beautiful serve. But nonetheless, Cuba just a handful of points away as we follow the fortunes of this Women's World Volleyball Grand Prix tie-up between Japan serving now and Cuba. We're in the fourth set. This could be the decisive one. And shots like that from Luis Hernandez are becoming increasingly frequent. Hernandez serving. A good block. Both the Cuban jumpers got up very high, but the shot was down the baseline, so it just flipped the fingertips of the Cuban blocker, and no direction on that block. But that service opportunity wasted as Torres comes up to resume the attack for Cuba. Great play from Cuba. They really shuffled up their options. The set came from center court, but instead of going to the left-hand side as was expected, it actually went back over the body to the right-hand flank, and that was where the telling spike came from. I think that was wide. Correction. Japan have it. Great play. Look at this one. Nobody was expecting it from Fukuda, number 7. Serving now, desperately trying to get Japan back into this fourth set. Well, a good fight. And you have to say a very good reception, but nobody was on hand to turn it into an attacking possibility. So Cuba 2 points away from taking this match. And if they do, of course, they will be the champion side of this Tokyo preliminary leg. Again, Japan baffled by the change of direction in the set. Instead of going from the center to the left, they went from the center to the right. And it's Guerrero there, number 4, is the woman who put the shot away. Japan saved 1 match point. It Is it too much to ask that they can get back into this game? A home crowd certainly doesn't think so. Great point for Japan. Wonderful point. 10-14. Well, could we see the makings of a real tremendous fight back? An illegal serve. And so Cuba looking at match point here. 4 match points. And that's it. Well, a great service was all that it took. A disappointing service reception, but Japan can certainly hold their heads up high. They put in a tremendous fight. It took 1.5 hours for Japan to be beaten 3-1 by Cuba. The score is 13-15, 15-11, 15-11, 15-10. And Cuba finished as Tokyo preliminary leg champions. Japan will be second, Russia and Germany third and fourth. Luis Fernandez, one of the star players in that Cuban lineup, but certainly for my money, the pick of the bunch, Caballero Rivera from Havana. A towering presence, 1 meter 9, and really the central figure in that very dominating Cuban performances in sets 2, 3, and 4. All credit to Japan, though. They put a very well-balanced and fast attacking team on the field, but in the end, the attacking power of Cuba dominated throughout pretty much all of the match, despite lapses in concentration, particularly in set 1. Cuba, therefore, the champions against Japan, and also the champions in the Tokyo preliminary leg. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye.